There have been serious setbacks for SDG achievement across the world as COVID-19 spread. But islands have been especially affected as tourism and food systems have been disrupted. Hear directly from island communities on sustainable solutions to mitigate these adverse effects.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kate Brown and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership. In this panel, we are going to hear from the early island leaders of the Local2030 Island Network, an exciting new network announced during last year's SDG Actions Zone. The Local2030 Island Network is the world's first global island-led network devoted to advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals through locally driven, culturally informed solutions. We're about islanders helping islanders, islanders learning from islanders, and islanders sharing best practices and developing scalable solutions. On this, the 5th anniversary of the SDGs, we see the impacts of COVID-19 and the prospects for SDG realization hitting islands the hardest, affecting tourism economies, food systems, and food supplies. At the same time, island communities are the engines of solutions, innovation, and culture. We believe that partnerships and culturally relevant solutions are necessary to achieving the state of the world we want and need. Since the last SDG Action Zone in 2019, the network has operationalized a partnership platform that brings together diverse partners committed to accelerating island-led solutions to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals while promoting an island worldview. Network partners agree to pursue 4 principles on identifying local goals, measuring progress through data, strengthening partnerships, and implementing concrete initiatives, and seeking to elevate diverse voices and forms of leadership, such as youth voices. As a result of COVID-19, we moved to a virtual platform, enabling islanders to hear from one another what their response is and how they are responding both in the short and long term. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in early April, "Finally, when we get past this crisis, which we will face a choice. We can go back to the world as it was before, or deal decisively with these issues that make us all unnecessarily vulnerable to crises. Our roadmap is the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The recovery from the COVID-19 crisis must lead to a different economy. Everything we do during and after this crisis must be with a strong focus on building more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies that are more resilient in the face of pandemics, climate change, and the many other global challenges we face. What the world needs now is solidarity, and with solidarity, we can defeat the virus and build a better world." Today, you'll hear from island experts about bite spots and SDG actions supported by network partners that can be scaled as models by islands and for islands. We're going to hear about island SDG momentum within the Local2030 Island Network, and secondly, how this can translate into island innovations and island action. But first, I would like to welcome Kalani Ka'ana'ana to open our session. He is the Director of Hawaiian Cultural Affairs and Natural Resources for the Hawaiian Tourism Authority. Kalani?
Aloha mai kākou e nā hoa makamaka o ka honua nei. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for having me. This morning in our protocol for opening, I'd like to offer a chant or an oli that essentially calls on the waves of the ocean to come to us. Metaphorically, ask for the strength of our ancestors to be with us as we face the challenges ahead of us. And so with that, I hope it inspires strength and resilience in us as island people and residents of island Earth in the work that we have ahead of us. And I offer this with aloha to each of you this morning. Nalunui aku kanalu mai kona, maloa ka mahie. Au nā ulu loa lele ka umalo ka kai malo hoaka o ka malo kai malo ke ali'i e ku ka humea pa i ka malo e ka ka la i ka papo hale po a pae o hale po i ka nalu o i ka nalu mai ka hiki he nalu a ke nalu o wai ke
Aloha, Kalani. Thank you so much for that opening and for reminding us of our connection, both to our ancestors and about what important work we are trying to do together. Thank you very much. And I would like to move to our next section and welcome all our speakers. We are all members of the Local 2030 Islands Network Steering Committee. Dr. Spencer Thomas, Chair of the Local 2030 Islands Network Steering Committee, is also Grenada's Ambassador and Special Envoy for Multilateral Environmental Agreements. We also have Krista Rasmussen, the Senior Research Associate of Policy and Planning at the UN Foundation, Celeste Connors, Executive Director of Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Hub, and Vanessa Torre, the Director for Foreign Economic Cooperation at the Ministry of Economic Development of Curaçao. And firstly, turning to you, Spencer, this is very much a network of islands helping islands. What do you see as the major gaps for islands in terms of SDG implementation, and how is the network addressing some of these?
Thank you very much, Kate, and good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Of course, Local Islands Network 2030, islands working together. First, I would like to say that in terms of the context, I just want to remind us that we are not talking about geographic configurations here. We are not talking about political configurations. We are not talking about small island developing states. Although, of course, small island states are involved and is part of this is not part of the key focus. We are speaking here of islands as a unique ecosystem with unique cultural characteristics, with unique vulnerabilities, and with unique problems and unique solutions. In fact, islands are hotbeds for innovative solutions, and they are a zone of best practices for these solutions. And I agree with you, Kate, that islands also are engines of solution, of innovation. But this is steeped in the culture and in island values. So we believe that islands should have solutions, global solutions that are globally significant, based on the indigenous and local knowledge, and based on the marriage with modern science. We see that islands have the potential to provide real examples for the entire world. So the first point really is that we are not speaking of islands as a geographic space. We're speaking islands as an ecosystem. And in the Caribbean, for instance, we refer to islands as island states, territories, dependencies, departments, offshore islands, smart islands, sister islands, outer, it doesn't matter. We're talking about islands as a ecosystem. So that is my first point. In terms of the gaps, your specific question, we could again speak to many gaps in terms of SDG implementation. Access to finance will be quickly identified as a gap. Capacity limitations on islands could also be seen as significant gaps. Data, the absence of data, lack of data, the whole question of the science and the evidence base could also be, because we have a tradition, what we call oral tradition, things that are handed down over the years through indigenous knowledge. So we could have an issue here also in terms of gaps, in terms of implementation. Our human resources capacity. And there is always the issue of the size of the countries being so small, we cannot take advantage of scale economies. And there could be also, in terms of gaps, setbacks to development as a account of natural disasters and all kinds of issues like that. But I think my real point I would like to make, though, is that in terms of gap, we need to focus on the socioeconomics of those islands. The poverty issue, we must focus on implementation. The issue of mainstreaming SDG implementation in development, I think, is the question. And to tie our development with the question of livelihoods, that livelihoods SDG nexus, and to ensure that we have the correct and the proper policy framework, including education and public awareness and inclusiveness, so that no one will be left behind. With that philosophy and island solidarity, I think islands can provide great solutions to the global community, which are of significance globally. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Spencer. Great thoughts there. Krista, UN Foundation is the facilitator of the global Local 2030 initiative, which was started by the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, of which this network is a part. What do you see as the opportunity to build momentum on implementing the SDGs, and why is the UN Foundation involved in it?
Thank you, Kate, and it's an honor to be a part of this discussion. So this month, we're marking the 5-year anniversary of the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the time they were developed, people around the world recognized that all countries everywhere faced urgent needs to act collectively and to address our gravest challenges, and that far too many people were being left behind. And in the 5 years since, where we've actually seen the greatest innovation has been at the local level. And what I mean by that is cities and state governments, universities, businesses, students, community foundations, NGOs, all coming together. And that is why the UN Foundation was so honored to be a founding partner of the Local 2030 Islands Hub and to help facilitate the Local 2030 Hub network. We truly believe that locally driven solutions are crucial for building a more just, sustainable, and resilient world. Local actors are pushing the frontiers of sustainable development. They're driving solutions, forming partnerships, and taking the brave and important steps to ensure no one is left behind, even in, and I would say especially in, the midst of a pandemic. They're the ones that are on the front lines of responding to the pandemic and are building a recovery that leaves no one behind. Local efforts are essential to achieving the SDGs. The Secretary General, as you were saying, and the Deputy Secretary General, the UN, and the UN Foundation believe strongly in the power of local action to achieve our global goals. At the start of 2020, he identified local action as one of 3 essential areas needed to deliver on this ambitious framework. This strong belief in the power of local action also drove the creation of the Local 2030 Network, which was designed to lift up and celebrate these initiatives around the world. The Local 2030 Network is a collection of multi-stakeholder hubs around the world, which the Local 2030 Islands Hub and Hawaii Green Growth Hub are both members, and they both truly represent the secret sauce of what is needed to achieve the SDGs, and that is partnerships, especially between different sectors. One of the things that is so important about the SDGs is that they are a common framework to bring together different groups, sectors, and locations in partnerships. The Local 2030 Islands Network and Hawaii Green Growth Hub are both wonderful examples of the power that arises from bringing different groups together. One prime example of this is how successfully the Local 2030 Islands Hub responded and adapted to the COVID-19 pandemic by continuing to bring together actors around the world to unite around actions and solutions for islands and by islanders. Going forward, this innovation and community-driven effort by local actors and especially island communities will be the source of solutions, innovation, and partnerships needed to recover from the pandemic, build a more sustainable world, and to achieve the SDGs together. So thank you so much for the opportunity and for being leaders on the SDGs, not just among islanders, but also around the world.
Awesome, thank you, Krista, and it's great having UN Foundation involved with us. Celeste, Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Hub is the co-lead of the Local 2030 Islands Network along with the Global Island Partnership. And what do you see as the value add of this network for SDG implementation and how it builds momentum towards 2030?
Thanks so much, Kate. And I also just want to thank everybody on the panel today for their leadership on island implementation. I think the value of the Local 2030 Island Network is that it recognizes that context matters. The way each country and region and local government and community identifies and implements sustainability strategies should be informed and shaped by the local and cultural context within which they're working. And whether it's deep ties to Indigenous knowledge and wisdom, and we're delighted to hear from Kalani this morning, or the physical context, as Spencer mentioned, as islands are confronted with the already occurring impacts of climate change, that local context matters. So I think what is significant about the Local 2030 initiative, and we do want to take the opportunity to thank and recognize Deputy Secretary Amina Mohammed for her vision and leadership on this, and the Secretary General, is that in order to achieve the SDGs by 2030 and to have the shift across every sector of society that is going to be needed in order to address the most and avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change, the implementation will need to take place on the ground at the local level and engaging civil society, business, and local governments through innovative partnerships. And islands with an island worldview means that we have been living in the reality and the legacy of finite resources, drawing upon these deeply rooted historic and sustainability and cultural ties. So we're well positioned to lead. As I said, we're already managing these impacts, sea level rise, wildfires and floods and severe weather events. So what I think this network chooses and is hoping to do is to share an island worldview with the rest of the world to help the global community emerge from the COVID crisis more equitable, sustainable, and resilient. And we're delighted to be a Local 2030 hub and to join that network to support the Local 2030 initiative. Hawaii has a deep history of Indigenous knowledge and wisdom and systems thinking. And we also have premier academic institutions focused on research. We have this political commitment. We were the first to sign on to the Paris Agreement by statute, the first to commit to 100% clean energy goal by 2030. And we have the Aloha Plus Challenge, which is Hawaii's framework to achieve the SDGs that was launched in 2014. And to Spencer's point, it was islands inspired by other islands. In fact, it was the Micronesia Challenge, which inspired the Caribbean Challenge, which inspired the Aloha Plus Challenge. And that is what led to the invitation ultimately for Hawaii Green Growth to join the Local 2030 initiative as a Local 2030 hub. I think the additional value of working together is the opportunity to look at the data gaps that were mentioned earlier by the other panelists, by Spencer. The dashboard that Hawaii Green Growth has pioneered with our partners is tracking progress on community developed goals and providing that transparency and accountability. And it's actually helping us identify gaps, where we're making progress and the bright spots, and where we will need to increase our ambition in order to meet our 2030 goals. I'm also delighted to announce today on this panel that we're releasing the first comprehensive statewide voluntary local review on the margins of the 75th United Nations General Assembly. And this is the first statewide VLR in the United States that includes the political commitments, actions, and initiatives of all four of Hawaii's mayors, the governor, the state legislature, and public and private sector partners. So we think that the collaboration we have through the Local 2030 Islands Network and the Local 2030 Hub has actually really allowed us to achieve our ambitions, but both locally and globally, and to share this island worldview with the rest of the world.
Thank you, Celeste, and congratulations on the voluntary local review. That's a huge achievement, and hopefully something we can see replicated by others. We're going to move to Vanessa. Vanessa, you're with the Ministry of Economic Development in Curaçao, and I think often we see the issue of the Sustainable Development Goals very much in an environmental lens. And in fact, this week is Curaçao's first National SDG Week. Can you tell us how you see the SDGs as a part of your economic recovery strategy during COVID-19? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Kate. Yes, I think the SDGs need to be more, the private sector needs to be more involved in the SDGs in order for it to be accepted and sponsored and empowered. In this case, the private sector is going to be involved in our SDG week in order for them to realize that only by integrating all these SDGs and have a sustainable approach towards economic development, we will be able to deal with future challenges and crises that will continue to come. As islands, we are vulnerable, and we have always the climate change as one of the menaces for small islands, but also financial turbulence because of the fact that we are small. We are constantly challenged by meeting our needs and financial needs. And now with this COVID pandemic, it took us a few steps back. But by continuing now more than ever to focus on implementation and the development of the SDGs, and especially the SDGs that have to do with economic development, SDG 8, SDG 7, which is also one of the SDGs that we are very much focused on. Since 2016, we have a National Development Plan, which identified a few SDGs as the priority, as the focus SDGs, and SDG 7 and 8 are included in that. And there we already realized that diversifying our economy and also focusing on exports to help the economy to thrive we saw that during COVID-19, with the start of COVID-19, we already identified technology as a catalyst for economic development. And now with this pandemic and in the situation that we are in, we saw that it was a very good decision to start looking at technology as a fueler, as a catalyst for economic development. By adding technology to several services, to several sectors, we will be able to be more, to facilitate more economic activity. And also, because of the COVID pandemic, we saw that the small and medium enterprises needed more support and more resources to be able to sustain themselves during the lockdown, and also after the lockdown, during the whole process this pandemic is taking us through. We saw that that could be a way to support and help the economy to thrive, to sustain itself, and be able to lead the way to more prosperous development for Curaçao. So I see that the SDGs are a very good way to continue the development. Now more than ever, we need to stick to that, and islands need to help and support islands. As mentioned earlier, the gaps need to be filled, and data, but also island-wide key performance indicators are those things that we need to work on in order to be able to support and also measure the development of the SDGs in islands. So that's my take for this moment.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And we're going to, you have some really great points there. We're going to now, with this first segment, ask our speakers to reflect a little bit on how they know they're succeeding. I will give everyone 1 minute to kind of give us a closing thought on how do we know that we're succeeding either at island level or globally. So I'll ask Spencer to kick us off.
Well, I will just say that we are here, so we are succeeding. We are talking to each other, and we are looking at the solutions that we propose, and islands, in fact, will provide a lot of solutions that are of global significance. So, and the solutions that we are proposing are being taken up globally. We are succeeding.
Awesome, thank you. Very clear answer there, Spencer. Krista?
I think we measure how well we are succeeding by looking at the most vulnerable in our community and making sure we are elevating those voices where possible. So how are those that are furthest behind or most vulnerable being treated, and how well are they doing on the SDGs? And that's how we measure success.
Wonderful, thank you. Celeste?
Thanks, Kate. I'd offer a very tangible way of measuring success that we're working on through the Local2030 Islands Network, and that's through the dashboard and sharing those models. And that the data needs to be community driven. In order to make success, we need to measure what matters, and we need to actually go into our communities and find out actually what matters to our community. So measure what matters, track the data on an open data platform, and that's a real innovation that the network is working on together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vanessa?
Yes, I agree with Celeste, and I'm very much interested in using the dashboard as a model for Curaçao as well. And I believe in developing KPIs for islands and also using this important dashboard. I think a combination of that will help us measure and see how we are progressing.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank this first segment for really setting us on our way and helping us understand kind of the significance of this network. We're now moving into our second segment, which is really focused on innovation and how these ideas or approaches can be scaled or replicated. So we're looking at the innovation in the context of the Local2030 Islands Network and Islands Helping Islands. We have two speakers who are also steering committee members of the network, Dr. Austin Shelton, the director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and University of Guam Sea Grant, and Susan Ausner, the co-founder and chief of strategy and operations at Shift 7. I'm firstly going to call on Austin. So Austin, Guam is launching Guam Green Growth this week. Congratulations to the governor and all involved in making this a reality, particularly during these difficult times. What are some innovations happening in Guam as a result?
Thank you very much. Kate, I'd just like to thank you, the Global Island Partnership and Hawaii Green Growth Local 2030 Islands Hub for guiding Guam through this new process of creating the Guam Green Growth Initiative. We started last year when the Local 2030 Islands launched. Our Lieutenant Governor Tenorio came to New York, and we joined as founding members of this network. And our local implementation strategy is the Guam Green Growth Initiative. And so we've been working since last year with a working group with 80 different members from all sectors of society. And this week we're launching our action framework. And so these will be our targets to locally implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And we're really excited to be starting this week. And I just wanted to quickly go over a few of the innovations that we'll be hitting with the Guam Green Growth Initiative that's facilitated by our University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability. So first, we'll have a G3 Circular Economy Makerspace and Innovation Hub. We're building this right now in a time where we're having many of our businesses close on the island because of the economic downturn and the loss of tourists coming to our island. We'll now have a space where entrepreneurs can come in and take what we usually just throw into the landfill and throw this trash away, and we'll be able to use 3D printers and CNC routers and furnaces and different presses to create products like banana paper wallets out of discarded banana trees, or plastic into trinkets and tiles and blocks and so much more. So we're excited to get this built up and start turning trash into cash instead of filling our landfills with trash. And then one other thing that's happening right now is as people are losing jobs and food security is becoming more difficult with halts in some of our imports, and so we realized during this pandemic that food security is more important than ever. So we're promoting more food security, and we're going to also be working with our vulnerable populations, houseless and veterans communities, to begin planting more in strategic places in villages, and also creating lots of aquaponic systems around the island. And finally, a last innovation that we have is the GROW initiative, where we're working on our natural resources. So we have a lot of erosion and sedimentation problems that are affecting our coral reefs. So we're going to be using some drone technology to drop seed balls into our watersheds and stop our islands from bleeding into the ocean, and hopefully make our coral reefs and fisheries a lot healthier.
Thank you so much, Austin. Wow, some really innovative ideas there. And I imagine lots of people are going to be in touch with you on some of those things. Thank you for that. Susan, you're with Shift 7, obviously also a member of our steering committee, but how do you create a structure or an ecosystem for effective lift of innovators? The idea that it takes a network, including what are some of the attributes of such an ecosystem? Can you talk to that, please?
Yes, thanks so much, Kate, and thanks everyone. I'm super happy to be here. Susan Elsner with Shift 7. I think innovation ecosystems are like natural ecosystems. In other words, they need diversity, they need balance. With more species in a natural ecosystem, they're more stable. So our theory is that to foster innovation, you need to increase inclusive collaboration. So the more different types of partners involved, the better, informing each other and working together. In our view, there are 7 main categories of colleagues who need to collaborate with innovators and with each other. Many of these are going to sound familiar to anyone from a UN experience with multi-stakeholder engagement, where you're looking for community builders who are focused on community service, and especially those who are building community around solution makers, industry leaders who can be business partners, academics who add perspective from research experience, fellow solution makers who can give insights from their own experiences and encouragement. Obviously, peer support is really important. General public is often overlooked as part of any kind of ecosystem, but this is critical. They have creative insights. They're often the ones experiencing the problems. And we want to make solution making feel like an accessible journey for everyone, so they would join in and we would grow the community. And obviously also funders, from philanthropists to investors, and most critically for this audience, policymakers. We need you to join in to this great gang of people working together to accelerate innovation. All this kind of collaboration builds collective genius. And then you also accelerate progress, because those who participate in design, ideation, and decisions will get more excited about implementing. Now, I just want to add 3 examples of really successful innovations on islands that we've run into through our UN Solutions Summit work and through our various partnerships with all of you in the Islands Network. And so I'm excited to share 3 examples of really great innovation that has focused on community building happening on islands. The first one is in Aruba, the Happy to Give Back campaign. This group of 5 people from 2 organizations, SEDE, Aruba, and 360 Degrees of Innovation, pulled together more than 100 companies, philanthropies, and nonprofit organizations in a short amount of time for the campaign, with a goal to reach $1 million raised to distribute food to the most vulnerable in Aruba. They got 12 radio stations and Aruba TV to broadcast a 48-hour telethon, and they're already more than halfway to their goal, using online, SMS, and even drive-up donations. They want to create a ripple effect, and they want to help other islands do this. So you can reach out to them at happytogiveback.com, or if you want to ask questions of one of the leaders, you can direct message Bianca Peters at Bianca_Aruba. Next project I want to highlight is Ma'o Organic Farms in Hawaii. They started in 2001, 2 people, Gary and Kukui Maunakea IV, with 5 acres. They are now at 281 acres and growing more than 40 varieties of fruits and vegetables. And the whole aim here is to build community, empower youth. They arrange for college scholarships in exchange for internships. And their vision is really just as much leadership development as training in the farming practice. And they have a deep connection to the relationship between the health of the environment and the health of people. They are now launching a $6.5 million capital campaign, which is a community investment opportunity, and have already also made it halfway past this fundraising goal. So great thing to check out at maoorganicfarms.org. And finally, the third project I'd love to share with you comes out of the Marshall Islands, Jojikum, which is a youth empowerment organization started by 4 people in 2012 for youth. One of them has evolved now to be an international leader as climate envoy for the Marshall Islands. That's Kathy Jetnell-Kitchener. She's also WHO Youth and Pacific representative, and they recently held a climate change and health arts camp, helping youth to come together to present solutions through their artistry for climate change and nuclear legacies. As many of you will know, Marshall Islands is on the front lines of climate change at only 2 meters above sea level. They are threatened severely by sea level rise, and we need to keep the temperature rise to less than 1.5 degrees to help them out. So you can find out more about Jojikum at jojikum.org, or contact Kathy on Twitter, direct message at Kathy Kitchener. In conclusion, all of these examples, you can see these people deserve support. Innovators everywhere deserve support. And with this kind of ecosystem approach we're talking about, we can really accelerate the achievement of the SDGs, and it's crucial that we do. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Susan. It's really great to see some really amazing examples from both from that range of islands, but also from Austin. What we're going to do now is kind of move to our closing segment, and I'm going to ask all of our panelists, what are the key messages you feel people should know about Island Action and the Local 2030 Islands Network? And I'm going to start with you, Austin.
I think a great thing to know is that islands are coming to the forefront of sustainability, and they're coming to the global forefront of leadership in island sustainability. And we'd love to share some of these innovations with the rest of the world, and also continue to learn from others who are advancing sustainability for the world. So I think, as we've heard earlier in the panel, Earth is an island, and islanders know how to take care of islands. So we hope that we can work together with everybody else for a more sustainable global future.
Awesome, thank you, Austin. And Susan?
Yeah, I mean, solution makers and innovators are everywhere. So we are just hoping that everyone who's working in leadership roles, whether it's in government or business or nonprofits, will be open to more collaboration. And know, if you see a problem and you are seeking a solution, look around in your community first, because surely someone there is working on the very challenge you're trying to address. And so team up with them. And then do participatory processes. Make sure that everyone's engaging in decision-making about how a community is going to progress on a challenge, because that's how you get the best solutions, and that's how you move the fastest. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And Spencer? You're up.
Thank you, Kate. My closing words will be that islands have a lot to offer the global community. The solutions are indeed in islands, and we have solutions of global significance, and we are key to ensuring that no one will be left behind.
Thank you. Krista?
Yeah, I would say that the Local 2030 Islands Network is such a prime example of partnerships, and that partnerships really are what is going to be needed going forward. And so I challenge people to look to islands for partnerships, both as leaders and partners for solutions going forward. The SDGs are a system, and they take a system and a strong system to address all of these challenges together. So look to how we can build the system going forward, and look towards the islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Vanessa?
Yes, I think islands can really help and support other islands and come with solutions. And so UN Local 2030 Island Network is a great platform to share information, knowledge, experience, and hopefully we will be able to welcome more islands to join this platform.
Awesome. And Celeste?
Oh, thank you, Kate. I want to just mahalo, thank all the comments of our other panelists, because sustainability and resilience is a long-term value proposition that is sometimes out of sync with short-term political cycles. So we're going to need those partnerships and community engagement that carries forward the commitment that allows us to keep our eye on the goals despite the near-term hardship, pain, loss of livelihoods of COVID. And islands are exactly well equipped to help the global community emerge from the current COVID crisis stronger, more equitable, and more resilient because of that history of systems thinking, because island economies have actually been pioneering in these areas for over 1,000 years. And so we encourage folks to join the network. We're delighted to help support as a Local 2030 hub, and we welcome more partnerships to carry us forward to a post-COVID recovery and to achieve the SDGs.
Thank you, Celeste. And I really wanted to thank all of our speakers. We had a lot, but each of them gave a really wonderful kind of perspective about why working in the island space is an inspiration. Personally, for myself, it is every day. But also, you know, islanders are out there kind of helping to lead the way on a lot of the things that we've been talking about through the last couple of days in the SDG Action Zone. And we're really pleased that we had the opportunity to kind of share some of those examples. And I also wanted to thank everyone for their interest in the Local 2030 Islands Network, where islanders are working with other islanders to innovate and scale innovative, values-based and resilient solutions. And we can hear lots of those coming through. And there are many, many more. We hear them every day. And I encourage people to get involved and learn about some of them with us, learn how we can scale and replicate them, and learn why working with islands really matters. For islands, this is our time to show the world a better path, and so we ask people to join us. Islands can come and join other islands, learn from each other as we move forward. In September last year, the UN Secretary General, during the Climate Summit, called on all sectors of society to mobilize for the Decade of Action on 3 levels. The global action to secure greater leadership, more resources and smarter solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. Local action embedding the needed transitions in the policies, budgets, institutions, and regulatory frameworks of government, cities, and local authorities. And people action, including by youth, civil society, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders, to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for the required transformations if we are going to get the future that we want. And I think, as we've heard through this panel with very small interventions by our speakers, we are seeing some of this start to happen and be recognized in the islands. In the Local2030 Islands Network, we believe that islands can and are leading the way. Please get engaged with us, and thank you very much for your time today.
Oh.